Tonight we have Amy Selwyn, who will be presenting a very, very interesting piece on AI and her family history. So I invite you all to sit back and just appreciate her vision. Really, really interesting. I'd like to thank our sponsors, which is ProPhoto, Photo Shelter, Epson, ProPhoto Daily, and American Photography. Sit back and enjoy the show. Thank you.
Well, first of all, Judy, congratulations. That was beautiful. It's
Thank you.
beautiful work.
Thank you.
And it's a pleasure to present with you. And it's also a pleasure to see, I took a peek to see who was here. And oh my God, so many of my colleagues from Maine Media, alums, friends from all parts of my life, college roommate, amazing. So this is very exciting, and a huge thank you to Frank for inviting me, because this is, I'm really looking forward to it. I want to start with a quote that I found, about a year ago now. I've been a photographer for 5 years, very, very recent for me. I started photography when I turned 60, and I went on a trip to Cuba with Peter Turnley. And if my friend Darnell Carr is still on the line, it was because of her. So thank you. I picked up a camera and said, "Oh my God, I've been a writer all my life. Now I wouldn't have to write. I could just like make an image. That's so much better." So I fell in love with photography. And over the past 5 years, I've done some street, I've done some portraiture. But as time has gone on, I've become more and more interested in the idea of legacy, and in the idea of what stories do we leave behind? We're not all going to be famous people. I don't want to be a famous person, but what's my thing that I've left behind? And I realized that for a host of reasons, some of which I'll touch on tonight, um, I don't have a very well documented past. My family doesn't, they weren't photographers, they didn't save anything. My mother was, like a minimalist before anybody was a minimalist. And so there's very little. And I came across this quote from Louise Bourgeois, and it just turned my head around. And it said, "If your need is to refuse to abandon the past, you must recreate it." And I thought, well, that's really interesting. We don't have photo albums, we don't have letters, we don't have anything like that. But could I actually create part of my story using this new thing called AI? Now, before everyone runs for the exits, I'm going to tell you about what I've learned from AI and why I feel, as I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago to some students at Pratt in New York, and the title of it was Generative AI, More Than a Pope and a Puffer. Because there was a famous an image in AI of the Pope allegedly wearing a big puffer coat. But that's the tip of the iceberg. And I think there's something about creating our pasts and keeping our stories that is really important. So at Maine Media, where I'm currently in my fourth semester of a 6-semester MFA program, in my third semester, that's when I started working with AI, and I started a project that I called The Last Jews of Lou, and I will explain that in a moment, from absence to presence. And I'm going to talk about this almost exclusively because it's a very large body of work for me now, and I'm going to be doing it for a long time. It's in component parts. Bear with me for 1 minute. I'm actually going to read from the catalog that I created for this work, just about maybe 4 paragraphs from the preface, because I think it describes it better than I could off the cuff. So the first thing to know is these are not photographs. These are images. I made these images, but not with a camera and not with cyanotype or any other alternative process. I made them by harnessing a creative collaboration between my imagination and the OpenAI deep learning model known as DALL-E 2, which was the old AI. Now it's DALL-E 3, and I can tell you lots about the difference between the two, but I use DALL-E 2. I call this body of work The Last Jews of Lou. My father's mother, whose name was Ruth, was born in a shtetl, a small town called Lu, spelling completely unknown, in the western region of the Russian Empire, so close to Ukraine. It was a place of poverty and hardship, and the Jews of Lu lived under the threat of religious persecution as czarist policy, state-sponsored anti-Semitism. At the same time, it was a community of people, and there were celebrations, there were weddings, birthdays, bar mitzvot, dances, holidays, plus, from what my grandmother described to me on occasion, a cast of community characters held dear for their oddities and their quirks. Most important, there was a deep sense of belonging in this tiny town of Lu. Ruth's father, whose name I never even knew, my great-grandfather, left Lu for the New World in 1904. For those who may not know this, the period between 1880 and 1920 was peak immigration for Eastern European Jews to America. And that's exactly when my father's family came. My mother's family is another story. He settled in Hartford, Connecticut, and worked for 7 years to scrape together the money for passage for his 2 young daughters and his second wife, their stepmother. They sailed steerage class from Odessa to Boston in 1911, and my grandmother was 14 years old. 2 more paragraphs, and we'll get to some images. As a place, Lu hasn't existed in decades. Any Jews who did not leave before 1920 were more than likely murdered by Hitler in the early 1940s. More than 1.5 million Russian Jews were slaughtered by Nazis. If anyone from Lu somehow managed to survive, Stalin's bulldozers would later complete the task. He didn't kill the people necessarily, but he got rid of the towns, and they were required to disperse. They did or they didn't. This is not a work of history. This is a work of collective portraiture. And you may have feelings about this. I'm sure you will. Most everyone does. Is this ethical? Is this right? How can I create something I didn't know? Does this really stand in for family history? These are things that, we can ask ourselves. I'm nearly done. I am recreating the story of my story on my father's mother's side. I go back only the 2 generations because that's all we have. I don't know anyone else in the family. Why am I working with AI? Because I have nothing. So I did all my research on things like hairstyles and clothing styles and what streets look like, and did they have dental care? Did people wear glasses? I did all of that research, extensive research, but none of it was from my own family archive. It's kind of a blank, and I was unsatisfied with the blank. My need is driven by the fact that I'm now 65 years old. I don't have any children. My eldest sister died, and she didn't have any children either. There's one sister remaining. She has 2 children. They don't live as practicing Jews. There's one grandchild, and he's not being raised Jewish either. I say that without judgment, but the fact is that our little family of the last Jews of Lu is really disappearing, and this is the time. This is the time to record a history. The opposite of memory is not forgetting. The opposite of memory is indifference. And so my search, my remediation of these 115 years between the time my grandmother left Russia and came to America, of my small family's history, is a portrait of a family as much as it's a portrait of me as a member of that family, and we are the last Jews of Lu. So this was some of the original work that I presented last semester at school, and that started me on this journey. These are not based on any photographs. These are completely from my head. I describe through written prompts, and in the old days, meaning 4 months ago with AI, with DALL-E, I could edit. It really is 4 months. I could edit on my phone if I wanted to. I actually did it on a laptop because I needed a larger screen, but it was very easy to edit. And so the key point is here, there was literally no image used to create this image. You'll notice that there are tags next to the photo, or next to the image, excuse me, not a photo. I named all of these people. I gave them birth dates and death dates. Birthplace, always Lou, and a place of their death, sometimes Lou, very rarely, and usually someplace else. In this case, Brooklyn. This is Noam Blau. He has a whole story. I created an entire story for every one of my people. And I made sure that it was historically accurate, not because I think this belongs in a history book. It absolutely does not belong in a history book. But the idea of the story, the respect for the people who lived these lives, demands accuracy. I should have told you something that I didn't. I spent 36 years in the news business. So, whatever you think of news, whether you think we tell the truth or we don't tell the truth, for me, that kind of heft and of accuracy is really important.
So, Amy, I have to ask you, and this would probably be the last question I would ask, but it's burning in my head
Please.
here. How
Yes.
how therapeutic, as you go through this presentation and as you continue on, how therapeutic is this for you as it relates to what you started with about creating history, the legacy, all of that? If you could share that or sprinkle that in as
Yes.
you continue.
It's a wonderful question, and thank you so much for asking it. This project started in my head, and it's now in my heart. I feel like I know these people. You could flash this in front of me, and I would know without having to look at the tag. That's Avigdor Shalansky. I've come to love them and their stories, and it's very therapeutic. It connects me to something that is very important. I used Avigdor Shalansky's story to bring in the history of anti-Semitism in the Ivy League, where he was not allowed to go to Columbia University because they had a very, very strict quota on Jews. So he ended up at City College instead, excuse me, at Yeshiva instead, which obviously did not have a quota on Jews. So I used these stories to actually tell the stories of my people, the immigrants of the early 20th century. Sometimes I would create a family, and I would put things in there. For example, we have people dying in 1918 in Moscow because they went to participate in the Russian Revolution and they were murdered. This is a good example of how you can see that AI, this one, for example, is a very nice representation of a human being. The person has 5 fingers, they have only 2 ears, and it looks like a person. Here, there was much editing that went on. And when I say I edited only in AI. I never used Photoshop. One of my mentors thought this was hilarious. She said to me, "Why aren't you using Photoshop? I mean, it's not like it's pure, it's AI." And I said, "No, it has to be a collaboration. If I go in with Photoshop, yeah, I can fix it. Although I'm not very good at Photoshop, to be honest with you, but I can fix it. But this, I want the sense of collaborating, and I got it. So on the far left, you see this little girl, and she looks almost like a Renoir. She's really not very precise, and I left it that way. Partly a photo from 1916 could look this way, and partly because that's one of the limitations. I'm not trying to do photography here.
So, I mean, I want to interrupt you at every second. So, you know, as you're doing this, and you're creating your family, you're creating your history, right? And
Yes.
where like when you put your head on the pillow at night, who do you think of? I mean, are you thinking of Ruth or Rivka? Who do you think about? Like, how does this bring you peace? I guess is
Mm.
my question. Or does it?
It does bring me great peace. It brings me peace in the sense that I feel like I've brought stories that will help people understand, help all of us understand and relate to those who make the immigration journey. And this, in my family's story, it's Jews, but this is happening every single day, as we know. And the terror that drives people and the conditions that drive people to think that getting on some boat, whether it's safe or not, or getting on a plane with a big refugee banner on you, or somehow leaving everything behind is preferable, it is terrifying. And to have some way of helping create empathy, or that is what brings me great peace, is to have us talk about Rivka Gessner, for example, who is not a real person. I have her contract a disease on the ship, and she's thrown overboard when she dies, because that happened too. But she could be real. Her stories are real. This really happened to people. And it makes us hopefully talk and think. Here's my personal favorite, my little guy, Mendel Markowitz, who changes Mendel Markowitz, actually, in his native tongue. He changes his name, of course, to Mark Markowitz, which is much easier in the Anglo tongue. And I just love him.
So, and Aim, tell me about the criticism you're getting. You have to be getting some criticism from some circles. And what is it? And how do you make yourself comfortable about that?
Yeah, great. Well, the bulk of the criticism comes before people have actually seen the work. So they hear that I'm working in AI and they immediately, oh my God, one of my colleagues who I really love, I know she's not on the call, but she's great. And she said to me, oh my God, you've gone to the dark side. Now, she hadn't seen anything yet. People have asked, oh, are you selling your cameras? No, I'm not. Um, but the criticism is mostly the concept of AI. And then from that, it could be, it's derivative, you're ripping off people's work. Also not true, because I'm doing all the prompting. I don't say in the style of, or give me a DN Arbus from Lou, no, nothing like that. Um, the other criticism, people less from photographers and artists and more from friends. They say, oh, but I can tell this isn't really a photo. To which my response is great, because it isn't. I would never pass this off as a photo. On the other hand, I just found out today, so I'm very excited, and I can't share the details yet, but believe me, I will, because I'm so excited about it, really. Um, at least 6 of my images from this series are going to be in a group show, as a type of photo album. It's a group show of AI, and I'm really excited because it's a legitimizing of this type of art. I am not suggesting that this is photography, and I didn't enter it in a photography show. It's with other AI. It's meant for us to ask questions. So the bulk of the criticism is really less around the work itself and more around the concept. But there are people who say things, occasionally like, oh, I could tell her eye was weird. Yeah, I'm not trying to fool anybody.
And,
Um,
and and are you getting anything from a moral standpoint? This, and it's not my position. I'm just blown away by this, and I love it. I really do love it. Is there anything from a moral standpoint, from a Jewish standpoint, from a historic standpoint, that kind of thing? How could you do this to our people? Like someone taking this other road that, I don't know who owns that road. I don't think anyone does, but coming after you from that standpoint.
No, in fact, every Jewish person that I've spoken with is really excited about it, saying, if this is going to open up conversation about the Jewish community, in particular about assimilation and diaspora Jews and, Jews outside of Israel, even the situation in Israel and what it means to be a Jew, well, everyone I know has been quite positive about it. There was one person who hadn't seen it, but who had seen a couple of images I had posted to Facebook a while ago, and she told me that I was a disgrace to Judaism and that I was mocking the situation in Ukraine. I didn't see that connection. I tried to explain it to her, but she wasn't open to listening to it, so I let it go. I've thought about, because she is a very intelligent and thoughtful person, I've thought about sending her the PDF of this and saying, you may have your view. Of course, you can have your own opinion, but I wanted you to see it. and you can make up your own mind. The catalog also has 3 essays, which, I read from the preface. There are 2 others which help with this. A happy moment, just married. Very common with AI to cut off part of a head, by the way. And if you look at his hands, here I'll do what I can't stand when other people do this to me, but I'll do it. If you look at his hands, they're a little weird. Faces and hands are hard with AI. It's changing now. Some of the AI images look so AI. They look, like aliens, or they look like comics, or it's acquiring this aesthetic that is not like this. And I don't personally like it. I really wanted a more photographic, a vintage photographic look. Sometimes I made the photographs unidentified because we wouldn't always know who these people are, and the faces are unclear. I also created images for the exhibition of this work that I've only done for my classmates at school, where printed on silk, or in this case, on very inexpensive polyester, because the silk was just like crazy expensive. I created images of pogroms, of danger, and I put those outside, surrounding the images, so that it would signify, or at least suggest, the outside world. The danger of the outside world, soldiers, horses, Cossacks coming to invade. There was a sense that inside the little village of the little shtetl of Lu, it was safe. Outside, there was, as there was, great danger, terror, hatred.
And Aim,
Yeah.
do you have someone that you share this work with on an intimate level, like any other family member, somebody else who's like really within your world that can bounce it off, that you bounce it off?
Um,
I know your family is tiny.
yeah, it's really tiny. I mean, I have one sister, and we're very close, and she lives nearby. Yeah, she was fascinated, actually. She is fascinated by it. And often, we would compare notes about things that Nana, Ruth, had shared with us. And I would share a lot of the research that I was doing with her. So in that regard, but I also have close Jewish colleagues who have been exceptionally gracious, and several people who, I know this sounds a little nutty, but we've met through Instagram, and they have just been so incredibly helpful, and given me so much information. Scarlett, who's on this call, is one of those people. Amazing. It's amazing the people who are out there in that community and are willing to help. I
And was this a project that was sort of in your head somewhere and AI pushed it out? Like if it wasn't for AI, would we ever get you to do this story? I mean, how could you? But
No, I might have written it,
okay.
but I didn't really want to write it. I wanted to do something visual. I imagined something visual and maybe auditory as well. I didn't really have it in mind, but once I started, I couldn't believe how quickly it was
Yeah.
coming. I tried to create images of people doing everyday activities, braiding challah in the public bakery. And again, there's a lot of like research that I would do, but I wasn't inputting research as prompts. I wasn't looking for documentary. It's not. I just wanted to get the sense of it. How many women worked in a bakery? How many people worked in a bakery? It was always women. Usually they worked in groups of 3 and 4. There's amazing information available. A
Yeah.
wedding scene.
Yeah.
This
Leslie has a question. Can you tell us about the AI aspect of it? How did you accomplish it with AI?
Sure. Great. Thank you, Leslie. Well, the way AI works, and I'll speak about Dolly 2. Dolly 3 is a little bit different. Dolly 2 looks almost like an app. It isn't. It's an AI large language model, but it's very user-friendly and interactive. And you come up with an idea, a concept, and enter in prompts that so words, they're word prompts, and they can be, you don't have to write in full sentences. It really helps if you love language. I will be honest with you with that one. I think I was lucky that I love language. I love to find the right adjective, the right noun, the best way of describing something. And then Dolly would come back with a number of possibilities, which you could either accept or reject. You can edit them within AI. So let's say this guy on the left, who looks a lot like Bob Dylan, circa 1970. Let's say I didn't want him to be wearing a hat. I could edit it by just eliminating it with my finger, and then give it a prompt saying remove hat. If it were that simple, it would be fantastic. AI has a mind of its own. It's got its own opinions, and sometimes it's very stubborn. And sometimes it just wouldn't accept what I was asking it to do. But, the more you go at it and the more you practice, the more I started to kind of think like AI. I thought, oh, they won't understand that, but they'll understand this. There are certain words that Dali will not accept. Anything sexual, anything, not that that came up, but Nazi, it won't accept rape. So it's got a sort of a censorship built in so that hopefully it's not being used for porn. It clearly wasn't in this instance, but I had to be careful if I wanted to suggest something like, every person was coming out with a kind of pug nose in the beginning. And I knew that wasn't right. That's not how people looked. And that there's another really important point. Just take a minute to say this. I was keenly aware of the fact that I did not want this work to look like an amateur production of Fiddler. I didn't want to start creating stereotypes because that's terrible too. If every image that I created featured Jewish people who looked like X, fill in the blank, the usual stereotypes, or Black people who look like X, or older people who look like X. I think that's a tremendous responsibility that an artist using AI faces. We cannot put that stuff into the database. We need to be very, very careful because once you create it, it will be in there. So I'm very careful about how I do that.
I just wrote this down. Unlimited imagination.
Mm.
So, when do you come up with, you know, Rivka or whomever, Lee was a jeweler, was a
Mhm.
banker,
Mhm.
was wanted to be a jockey. Like you can come up with anything, right?
Anything,
Right. So like how do you control yourself not to go too far with your imagination because you can, any of these people could have been anything, right? I
anything.
mean,
Yeah.
w- w- you
It's
know,
a wide open
how
field.
do you manage that? And did your sister help you with that piece of it? Are you maybe going too far afield here?
No, no, that's a really good question because there was a process. And I've been thinking this way since I started my MFA. And the head of the MFA program said to me on the very first day, I want you to promise me that the work that you do will be led by a visual concept and not by writing. I don't want you to illustrate things. I don't want you to write and then illustrate it. So I promised him that, and it was very good advice. I always made the image just with prompts. I never gave any backstory, anything like that until the images were done. And then I looked at them and I said, okay, I've created a village. Now, who does what? And this is funny enough that you should ask that question with this image because this is probably the one. There's a couple. I have a barber. I'm making challah. I did have the women working in the bakery. This person is called a Schulklopfer. And he would knock on the door. This is a real function. It was a real function. He would knock on the wooden part of the windows or on the wooden part of the house if the house was made of wood, which it usually was. In this case, it was brick. And he would knock to signify that Sabbath was starting. So finish up whatever you're doing and, get to the synagogue soon. And so I wanted that. I wanted a Schulklopfer, and believe it or not, Dolly knew what it was. And I really wanted it to seem historically accurate by saying, we don't know who this guy was. It's a photo, but it's not. So I said, possibly Laser Warshawski, we don't know. And then a young girl, Leah Lurie, who I later bring to New York, to New Jersey, where she lives until 1959. This is the last image in the book, in the catalog, but it's certainly not the last image. Do I have 5 minutes, Frank, or is
Yeah,
it?
you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. And this is Shmuel Hirsch, who started a Jewish summer camp in the Catskills, which allowed me to bring in the rich history of Jewish summer camps and their socialist leanings and, all the things that I experienced as a kid when I went to summer camp.
Mm.
So that part of the project I quote unquote completed. And I thought, okay, I'm going to move now to the next era. Maybe we'll go to the 1940s or 1950s. Again, a chronological approach. When out of nowhere, I created these two images. And they were both involving the very interesting thing of a floating suitcase. Both of these people are with a suitcase, but neither one is holding onto it. And are they coming or are they going? Are they leaving? Are they leaving for America? Are they coming to America? Where are they? But the floating suitcase really stayed with me, this concept. And this is where imagination, like it can be so fun doing this, but it can also be like, oh my God, how do I make this all work together? Like you're actually creating a village. And the idea of the suitcase really stuck with me because I thought, we all carry suitcases. We carry stuff with us. Maybe we don't see it. Maybe it's floating around behind us, or it's above us, or it's invisible. But we carry the stories and the memories and the fantasies, the wishes, the bad things and the good things. And we carry that with us. And that's part of our legacy. And I started by talking a little bit about legacy. So the work has now taken on a slightly different, quite different look, and I'll just show you a couple of things that have been going on. These are all made from AI. If you look carefully, you can see Rivka Gessner's eyes. These are composites of 3 or 4 layers of AI characters. All of them are from Lou, and all of them have someone from Lou, and they also have some contemporary descendants, if you will. And I've composited them to reflect the idea of the suitcase, the idea that we are a composite of stories. That's who we are. If we could really do a portrait, it would show where we came from and where our families came from and what mattered to us. And when I think about, and again, my starting point was I'm 65, I don't have children, and my family is tiny. What tiny little dot in the universe mark did I leave? And that's kind of the idea behind these, is to create these images that bring in several generations, at least 3, often 4, and the introduction of hybrid work, meaning I'm using some lens-based photographs that I have made. So that's always my work. And I do that in the editing process, which again, I still don't use Photoshop. And so these are stories about generations of people. And here, this is a composite that involves a very high lace neckline of a bridal gown and a character who describes herself as a butch lesbian who has tattoos all the way up her neck. And she is a descendant of the people of Lou. And I wanted to convey that the tattoo could also be lace, and the lace could be a tattoo. And it's beautifying the sound of a voice, that when a woman speaks and shares her story, it can be a very beautiful thing. Again, generations of people. This is 4 generations all in one photograph.
So
Excuse.
now we're really using the technology more than the historic piece.
Correct. Yeah. Now I'm using the technology to put the histories together. And with this, there is an audio soundtrack. Well, it's really not a soundtrack. I hope I can explain this well. It's me telling stories unscripted. I just record myself. I mean, of course there's and and like. I mean, I don't want it to sound perfect. I want it to sound like I'm just talking. And I'm telling stories of that I know of my family. There aren't that many, but or of other families, and creating this kind of sense of there are ghosts in the room. There are ghosts among us, not in a frightening way, but in a kind of reassuring, hopefully, way, but also a kind of mysterious way. So the images are, I imagine them, on the wall, and someone is sitting and they're just listening to someone tell a story. They don't see me. I'm not on video. It's just my voice. And I have, at this point, I have over an hour of these stories.
Hmm.
And this is the most recent one. And here, this is 4 generations all in one composite. And that's my presentation
Wow.
with details.
Wow. That's so where are you with the project? Is it continuing? Is it now complete?
It's definitely continuing. I mean, I feel like it's just like the tip of the iceberg. Now I've brought in video. Sorry, audio, not video. I'm thinking about, is there some sort of 3D printing that I want to do with this? I mean, how do I want to make the village come alive? And the idea is, although it's an individual story, it's my story, it's a universal story. We all have pasts. Some things we know and some things we don't.
Right.
Um, so, and funny enough, for my work next semester, I'm going back to a camera. Yeah, so,
Okay.
but I will always continue to use AI for certain things, but I'm also going to.
And will you, I mean, are you compelled to go back to these places in Eastern Europe for any sort of inspiration? I mean, is that something that you thought about?
I'd love to. I have been there. I've traveled pretty extensively in Eastern Europe and including Russia. I wouldn't feel safe there right now. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think this is the time. Um, but but at some point, I'm hoping to. Yeah,
And do you reach out to synagogues or Holocaust museums, to present the work?
right. So that's what's coming next is really, how to frame it. And I'm talking to a colleague of mine who does just absolutely gorgeous and brilliant work. And we're thinking about uh, hers is really addressing something from the Holocaust, which is her family background. But we're thinking about co-approaching, if you will, approaching together. But yes, I mean, I've had a lot of really great feedback from Jewish organizations, just that the idea is, really interesting to them and they'd love to see it and see how it might work.
Yeah. 'Cause the interesting piece about it is that it's very large, but you have some natural historical perimeters, right? Where it keeps you sort of corralled in,
Yes.
in this beautiful mosaic of the history, and that's really great because otherwise you could be everywhere.
Oh, exactly, exactly. It's one village, and then it's one city, Hartford, Connecticut. It's not even New York. It's like that's just too
Right.
big, or LA. But and then it's one family. Really, I mean, the stories are about my family.
Right. Oh. So if anyone else has any questions, any comments, we can unmute yourself for Amy or Judy. But those are two great presentations. And you should know both presentations will be up on our YouTube channel probably a week, 10 days. Jay does a little bit of editing, so you'll be able, if any of your friends have missed Amy or Judy's presentation, you'll be able to see it in a pretty short time.
Thank you. I'm reading some of these comments and all
It's
I say is
my
thank you.
God,
Yeah,
really
thank you.
beautiful.
Made my
It's,
day.
and I mean, it opens up from a creative standpoint, it opens up so many other possibilities, to use AI in such a positive way,
Yes.
right?
That's part of the message. I really believe that, it's not all about the nightmare and the horrors of AI, that there's actually something constructive that we can do with it.
Right. And the beautiful thing, you've really created your history.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you really have. And so, will you put together a book? Like a finished book on this? What's your plan?
I'm thinking about that, and I haven't come to any conclusions yet. A book would be a really great way to go. I haven't done anything in the book art, so I'd have to, learn all of that. But
You're not going to make money. That's one thing.
no, no,
Any anyone that does a photography book will tell you that.
there's nothing
Um,
I've ever fallen in love with in my life that's ever going to make me money, but so be it. Yeah.
yeah. Mm.
I'm I'm opening up a gallery up in Catskill, New York, and I get more paint on my hands than on the wall. And one of the pieces of art that we're doing is by an artist that does AI, and he has been asked, why do you charge so much? And he says it only takes a button to push, and it doesn't. It takes him weeks to do
Oh,
one
yeah,
piece.
yeah.
And so um, if people ask
Hmm.
what kind of prints are those, we'll discuss it. But it's first of all, it's art. So it's got to be taken as art, not as AI is replacing this or photography is replacing that or whatever. So
Thank
keep
you.
at it.
Actually I'm 3 weeks into a course that I'm co-teaching on generative AI and the creative process. And it's a 5-week course, just it meets on Saturdays. And a number of the students have commented saying, wow, this is so much harder than I thought it was. How do you get it to come out like that? And it isn't the first time, and it isn't just pressing a button, that's for sure.
We have a question there. Yeah, your hand is raised. Go.
I'm sorry, I'm on an iPad and I can't find where to type it in. But hi, I'm Holly Raskin Sachs. I think I see it just says iPad.
Yeah.
Your work is amazing. And my question is, I was really intrigued with the fact that you were taking AI generated images and then doing something with photography, maybe overlay, or I don't know. Could you describe that a little bit so we
Yeah.
could get an idea?
Sure. So, this is a little bit embarrassing, but I'm just going to tell the truth. So, because I'm so bad at Photoshop, I had to think about how can I create composites from this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I use a phone app called Snapchat, and I
Mm-hmm.
use double exposures in Snapchat, and I just keep re-exposing and re-exposing, and sometimes I don't like it and I start over. I have the wrong layer in front. And so I'm just using something to help me decide which layer goes with which, and I move it around manually. And it's a very satisfying process because it
Mm-hmm.
really feels like, it's not just like a mouse. I'm using my hands, I'm moving the image around, and I feel like a kid again. Like, no, let's put the unicorn on top of the, swimming pool. Let's do that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how it works.
Yeah.
And are you doing it on your computer or on an iPad or on your phone?
Kind of all of the above, although I don't have an iPad anymore. But if I did, it would be perfect for this because it's
Mhm.
got the right size screen. The laptop is
Mhm.
funky for this kind of thing, and the phone is really small but easy. And I heard a talk by Philip Toledano just a couple of weeks ago, actually
Mhm.
at my class. And he said, "Oh, I love it. I'm like making work on the subway. I'm commuting and I'm doing AI. It's great. No more of this massive Mac, that where I'm shackled to the studio."
Yeah, you know what would be a nice thing, if we see what kind of feedback we get, but if you took 10 images and you showed us the process that
Sure.
we started here and we ended here, and
Yes.
all your prompts,
Yeah.
to get us here, that could be an interesting
I'd
evening
love to
of
do that. I would love it. And if you haven't ever used AI, here's something really wild. It never produces the same, it never generates the same image twice. Even if you use the same prompts, it will not be the same. You might get close, but you won't get the same image ever. So it's this really cool experience of forever living in the present tense. It's like, okay, I made this and now I cannot get that back again. The latest development with, I think it's either Dolly or Midjourney, the sort of the two big ones. They're both going to offer this very soon, is that it's now going to remember if you have characters and it will allow you to keep working with those same characters.
And does AI make suggestions?
Not yet. I mean, it does in a way. Let me answer that differently. I shouldn't have said not yet. I think that'll be coming, where it'll be obvious that it's a suggestion. But here's something that Dolly 3 does that Dolly 2 didn't do. It takes your prompt and it kind of rewrites it. So, and it's in love with the word serene. For whatever reason, it wants everything to be serene and graceful, or serene and feminine, or serene and this and that. And it loves a nice, happy, clappy narrative. It loves that. It loves everybody to be happy and, nobody to be sad. So it does override perhaps the spirit that you're intending. So you have to tell it, do not change my prompts. And sometimes I find myself in the height of ridiculousness of kind of yelling at the screen. I said no earrings, and there they are. I mean, there was this woman from 1912 in Russia with these massive, like sort of pop art earrings, and I couldn't get rid of them.
Mm.
I had to abandon the image.
It's also interesting, the whole process of, from beginning to end and what you get. And do you always feel satisfied, or do you feel at moments, I got to give that up?
Oh, definitely the latter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm stubborn. I mean, I'm really stubborn.
And that's what I wanted to say. Someone coming in the middle of this presentation immediately hates you, but from the beginning, because you put all your disclaimers in. Right? Like you say this, you say that, you set the table perfectly. And you
Thank
really have to do that, right? For
Yeah.
any presentation. And you do that really, really wonderfully. It's important, right? So where do you take the show to next, Aim?
Well, I'm going to continue working on the piece that has the audio files, and I'm going to work with my colleague on framing a proposal for how we can install and show the work at galleries or museums. And we're, kind of thinking big here, not just like my local whatever, but hopefully something that would attract more people so that we can get more conversation going. I'm I'm in love with my people from Lou and all the things that they can do. They not only gave me their stories, they gave me my story, and I feel really indebted to them for that.
And they're glad that you did.
It feels that way. It feels like they're out of the box,
And
like,
Amy, do not give this stuff away. Negotiate good fees for all of this. Just because you're going to museums, everyone's making money. You and your colleagues should make money. You need, and I'm available. You need a rep on this,
okay.
so
All
you
right.
could really, I'm always yelling at the photographers for giving stuff away. But
Great, I love
you know,
this.
yeah, because it's really important, and you can see, and that's the other piece of this is to see how you can take this idea and apply it to something else in the commercial space that really makes a lot of sense. That
Yes,
it isn't such a stretch away from reality. You
right,
know, it's
right.
yeah, you guys, yeah, you've created something that's really important, really, really
Thank
important.
you. So I'm so honored, really, by this was a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah,
And
you should take a minute to look through these through
I'm
the
going
chat
to
room.
be proud
I,
of what you did.
I mean,
Thank
this that's and yeah, I mean everyone, everyone is really enamored by this whole thing. And Judy, what's next for you after you unmute?
After I mute, yeah.
Yeah, what are you doing next?
Well, I have a few new images that I want to do, working on, and I don't have anything really planned right now. So,
Okay. Well, this gentleman who's on, Bruce Byers, does a lot of expeditions in a variety of different places, Cuba being one of them. So, you could always look at Bruce Byers' website and see where he's going and when he's going and why he's going and, a variety of places around the world. That's something, Bruce is a great resource in
okay,
you.
well, that's good
regard.
to know.
And he'll watch out for you. He'll take care of you. He won't let anything happen to you.
I've
Well,
only lost maybe one person.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
I
And that
think
was
I,
okay. We didn't like that person
I
anyway.
think that was me, so don't worry about it.
But so I need to tell you both that this was really a great, great evening, and you have a standing offer to come back, show us more work, tell us what you're doing, with your prints, with your new ideas, with using technology, everything. We would love to have you back. And for everyone, these both of these presentations will be on our YouTube channel, like I say, within a week or so. And we'll make a notice to that, and we'll send it to everyone so that they can see it, and tell everyone to be there. That's it. And we're on again for April 24th. So again, I thank everyone for coming in. It's another terrific night, and including Sandy. So Amy, Judy, thank you very, very much.
you. Thanks so
Thank
much. Thank you, everyone. These are
thank you, Jill.
beautiful.
Both of you,
Letting
your
me know I
presentations were fabulous.
really
Really
enjoyed it.
Fabulous.
It's great.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Frank. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Frank.
No, thanks, Amy, for doing it. You guys did a great job.
Thank you
You
so
guys,
much. It's
great,
great.
great job.
Hey, Fred, let me know if there's Frank, let me know if there's a time to do one.
Yeah, we will. You're breaking the record, Bruce. That would be 4 or 5, right? We'd love to do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We will. Of course, we will. Thanks, Wendy, for coming in, and Lothar and Jerry. We appreciate everyone coming. Ingeborg's there again. Yeah, we appreciate everyone coming very, very much. And we'll see you next time.